not here, so Commissioner Drew raised his hand for me.
I'll be brief with the trapping committee update. Essentially, we had 2 meetings, one in Reno and one in Las Vegas, and the primary focus of those meetings was to address the Charleston issue. Both meetings were very well attended. We had a lot of input from both sides, and the output of both of those meetings essentially is the draft regulation that you guys saw in front of you earlier today. At this point, I'm not sure that we need to go in depth with it. Chief Bonamici did a very good job of sorting through it. I don't know that I need to rehash any of that ground. I know Commissioner McNinch had asked me to ask Rob for an update on the status of CGR 406, which was the residential regulation that we had developed. But I don't see Rob here. I know he wasn't feeling well, so we may have to save that update for tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to set tomorrow. And I have nothing to add. It was basically Charleston in the last 2 meetings, so, and that's what we're dealing with on the commission. So, any questions on that?
Where do you guys stand on the technical amendments, technical trapping amendments?
I'd like to have Rob present when we answer that question too, because what they submitted and what came back don't look the same. They're far from it, and there's issues with it. And as big as issues are, the changes to correct it might not be the minor changes that LCB accepts. So it's not an easy fix at this point to get that moving forward. But we do need to discuss it. But like I said, I'd like to have Rob here for that. Okay. Any other questions? Agenda item 10B, NDOW Fiscal Year 2014-15 Agency Budget Request. Deputy Director Patrick Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last meeting, I gave the Commission a series of reports concerning our budget request, our adjusted base budget, and a list of enhancement units that we were proposing to submit to the Governor and the Budget Office for consideration. I'm not going to go over those again in any great detail, other than to say we did meet our statutory deadline to submit our budget request to the Budget Office on August 31st. The numbers that were submitted did not change substantially from what I presented to the Commission last time. Our adjusted base budget numbers did change a little bit. You may recall that the base budget is based on our current fiscal year, or well, the fiscal year that just closed, fiscal year 12. Those numbers, the way the process works, what we submit on August 31st is considered a preliminary agency request budget. As the state closes state fiscal year 12, those numbers will be updated. An agency request won't actually be finalized until October 1st. There won't be any big changes in those numbers, but they're not final. And rather than give you a set of reports that are still draft, I just opted to just kind of explain to you what we submitted. After October 1st, I will produce a series of reports and put them on our website and give them to the Commission for what the final submitted agency request was, so that you can see those final numbers. But nothing really changed substantially. A couple of things that we did change a little bit based on our funding analysis, and that I will go into in just a moment. On our enhancement units, you may recall that we had 2 boating safety warden positions proposed for elimination due to declines in boating revenue and our ability to fund that program. When we did our final reserve analysis for fiscal year 12, our ending reserves were a little better than we anticipated them being. So we actually reduced that to eliminating only 1 warden rather than 2. we had, that program was potentially going to face quite a hit between the elimination of those 2 boat wardens and also shifting one of those wardens to the aquatic invasive species program. That would have been a total loss to boating safety work of 3 wardens, and that was certainly of significant concern to us. Even eliminating 1 warden is of concern to us. So we try to minimize that impact as much as possible. The only other real change concerned equipment and vehicles. We did make some minor reductions to our equipment requests. For instance, for the Habitat Division, they had some large pieces of equipment that they had requested. There was a grader in that request, and it was proposed to be funded as a new piece of equipment. And in fact, we usually never buy a new piece of equipment for them. We go out and get something used. So we did reduce that a little bit and just sort of established a budget, reduced about $100,000 out of that, and just established a budget that we felt was sufficient to get a good used piece of equipment for the WMAs. And we also had a request for vehicles. We were able, with our reserve analysis at the end of the year, to pick up a little more than half of the vehicles that were requested in the numbers that I presented to you last time. That's going to put a pretty good dent in our replacement of vehicles. I've talked several times about the age of our fleet, so that will definitely improve our fleet. Doesn't give everything to everybody that they ask for, but we'll definitely make some very good headway. We haven't been able to replace vehicles for quite some time until the last year, when we figured out how to use federal funds to replace some of those vehicles. So we're going to continue with that, and that'll really help. And that really is all the changes from what I presented to you last time. With that, unless there's any questions on that, I want to turn to our revenue projections. And I did pass out a one-page spreadsheet for you concerning our revenues and reserves. And I did put some on the ends of the podium here for the public in case they would like to follow along with that. What this spreadsheet shows is our budget account 4458, the wildlife account. And this account, as part of our budget split that we enacted in this last fiscal year, is used to accumulate all of our fee-based revenue and to hold that revenue into reserve categories. And we don't use any money in that account to spend money. We collect it, account for it, and then transfer it to the various operating budgets as needed. The reserves that we hold in this account, there are 3 types of reserves. There is an unrestricted reserve, which is basically most of our license sales and tag sales. And then we have the restricted reserve, which is the various specialty privileges, duck stamp, habitat conservation fee. Those fees used to be accumulated in what was called the obligated reserve account. Everything that is unrestricted reserve was held in our old administrative account. Those 2 reserves are denoted on this spreadsheet in green and yellow, green being unrestricted reserve, yellow being restricted reserve. And our other 2 types of reserves are boating, which is denoted in blue, and trout stamp, which is denoted in red. So for each one of those fees, you can see visually where it fits into those 4 major reserves. And in case in point, each of these fees actually has its own mini reserve, but we accumulate them into those 4 reserves in this account. One thing that I will note about this, the spreadsheet gives you a good overview for several years, actually about 3 biennia, as well as our projections for 14 and 15, so you can kind of see the trends over time. One thing that was different for fiscal year 12 as part of our budget split, you can see at the top of the page, the first line, license and fees. That was one general ledger account that accumulated basically all of our license sales and permits and tag fee revenue. We used to lump that into one GL, and we've now split it out into the various types of licenses, resident, non-resident, combo fishing, etc. And I found this very useful. It's difficult to compare to the historical data, but you can see the breakdown under fiscal year 12 that we just recently closed, and gives you an idea of the composition of those revenues. So you can see exactly where the various revenue sources are coming from. Another thing I'd like to point out, you'll see in the second column, you'll see 3 descriptions highlighted in yellow. Those are fees that were new fees to the department in this current biennium as a result of legislation. The resource enhancement stamp, that is revenue that comes in as part of the Dream Tag program. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. In order to participate in that program, one needs to buy a resource enhancement stamp, and the stamp money itself comes to the department. The Dream Tag money does not come to us. That's new. The aquatic invasive species fees, that program obviously was new in the last session, and we haven't collected any money in fiscal year 12, but we do anticipate collecting money starting in fiscal year 2013, and you can see those revenues projected out. We have a kind of a low estimate of about $500,000 for fiscal year 13, just based on the number of motorized boats that we have in state. Of course, the fee will also apply to non-motorized boats and non-resident boats, so we'll certainly end up collecting more than $500,000. Exactly how much is unknown. And then the other fee is energy development. The bill that passed in the session requires energy development companies to pay fees to the department to defray the cost of reviewing those projects. We have not yet collected any fees related to that, and we've tried to take a run at projecting how much we'd collect, but it is so variable and so project dependent that we didn't put any estimates in our forecast for that. But we left it in there so you could see that is a revenue that should be coming to the department. Steve Siegel tried to do some estimates. I mean, it could range from anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000, fairly modestly. But again, it's totally project dependent, and every dime that we do receive of those funds will go to offset sportsman's dollars and our federal grants that historically have been used to do those kind of project reviews. For fiscal year 12, for revenue overall, for our fee-based revenue, we actually had a very good year. You can see for total revenue for fiscal year 11, the year prior, we collected about $15.5 million in fee-based revenue. In this last year, fiscal year 2012, we collected $17 million. Quite a nice increase, $1.5 million. Certainly a shot in the arm for some of our programs where our reserves were a little bit thin, and we were holding a lot of positions vacant. Holding positions vacant for a period of time in order to save funds, deferring purchases, things like that, to try to keep our reserves in decent shape. So this was definitely a good year for us. And it was really across the board. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the increase in tags in this last year. That certainly did help our bottom line. About $500,000 of that revenue increase is directly attributable to the increase in tags, but it's not just big game hunting programs that account for that. Really across the board, we've seen all license types increase. About $200,000 of that increase is directly related to just fishing licenses. Obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with big game. As a matter of fact, even our boat registration and titling fees increased a little bit in fiscal year 12, which was very good news to us. Our boating program has been the most challenged fiscally, so that's really good. I hope we've turned the corner on that. Unfortunately, the other funding sources, motorboat fuel tax and the federal grant that fund that program, the grant's not in here, but the motorboat fuel tax is, those have continued to decline. I hope we've hit bottom on those and they start going up again, but it's a good sign for the boating program as well. Basically, to project out for 14 and 15, we just used the revenue from fiscal year 12, what our actuals were. I could have projected this many different ways, but not having a lot of detail on this breakout on the different fee types, I didn't want to try to go into different methodologies and just use sort of the standard way we budget, just taking fiscal year 12 actuals and projecting those into 14 and 15. So that helps our bottom line quite a bit in our revenue, keeping us above 17 million projected revenue in 14 and 15. You know, will we earn as much revenue in those future years as we did in FY12? Hard to say. We don't know. That's anyone's guess. Will we have as many tags allocated next year? Nobody knows that, depending on fire and survey results and the kind of winter we have. But with lack of any other information, those are the figures that we used. What this did, this increase in revenue, was really allow us to include a lot of the equipment requests that we discussed previously. And should those revenues not come to fruition, we simply won't make a lot of those equipment requests. And we'll, take other actions that we have been doing in the past, not filling positions and making sure that we live within our means. This is just a rough budget and a guide, and we watch these revenues very closely, and we make operational adjustments as needed if they don't come in as planned. The bottom section of the spreadsheet is an analysis of our cash reserves, of how much cash that we're carrying at the beginning of each fiscal year and the end of each fiscal year. You can see how much cash we started with. For instance, in fiscal year 12, we started the year with $11.8 million in total cash, broken down amongst the three reserves. We had $17 million of revenue, and we expended about $15.5 million of that revenue. That bolstered our reserves so that we ended fiscal year 12 with $13.4 million. And you can see, cycling through the fiscal years, that bottom line figure, ending reserves at the bottom of the spreadsheet, that with everything that we have budgeted, including the equipment, if revenue comes in the manner that we hope it does, we should end the fiscal year 14-15 biennium with about $17.2 million. So that's pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. That gets some of our reserves up to where I think they should be for cash flow management purposes. And I think if this how the revenue comes in, our program should be in pretty good shape. But like I said, it's all dependent on things that are sometimes beyond our control, and we'll adjust as necessary. But even if the revenues don't come in at those levels, we should still have a pretty good budget request that should allow us to fund the equipment and programs that we previously identified. And that's pretty much all I have. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? That's what happens when you have the last presentation of the day. Okay.